Hi guys, Romansliders here, with a new episode of Gaming Rewind, this time taking a look at the Phantasy Star series. Phantasy Star was, and continues to be, Sega's premier RPG franchise, providing a strong dose of sci-fi to boot. One can see Phantasy Star as Sega's version of Final Fantasy, with its science fantasy roots and storylines that centre on the characters of each game, all of whom have their own personalities and abilities that aid the player. The first game in the series, Phantasy Star, was released in 1987 for the Sega Master System, and at the time was considered one of the pioneers among role-playing games, both for its advanced graphics and one of the first story-driven games to be released in the West. Phantasy Star, along with the next three installments, take place in the Algol star system and focuses on Alice Lanadale, who goes on a quest to take revenge for the death of her brother Nero by trying to end the tyranny of King Lazic, and the series' antagonist Dark Force, an ancient being that has been manipulating the galaxy. Phantasy Star was one of the first games to establish RPG conventions, such as overworld maps, towns to visit where the player could engage with citizens, random enemy encounters and dungeons. Battle switches from an overhead to a first-person perspective and featured turn-based gameplay, with players being able to use a combination of weapons and magic to defeat enemies. Phantasy Star also featured technology that could present pseudo 3D graphics in dungeons and animated enemy sprites that were critically praised, as the sprites had more frames than were common at the time. The sequel, Phantasy Star 2, was released for the Sega Mega Drive in 1989. The game takes place 1,000 years after Phantasy Star and introduces new protagonist Rolf, who must combat the Mother Brain, a giant computer that protects the Algol system when it malfunctions and tries to destroy the star system. Gameplay is similar to the original, with turn-based battles and allowing the players to choose a party from up to 4 characters. There are 8 playable characters, each with different skill sets and personality. Phantasy Star 2 no longer uses the first-person view for dungeons and battles, as in the first game, and instead uses a top-down perspective for exploration and a third-person view for battles. Since its release, Phantasy Star 2 has gained a cult following and is considered to be one of the most influential role-playing games there have been. Phantasy Star 3 Generations of Doom was released for the Sega Mega Drive in 1990. The game differs from the series so far, taking place in a medieval fantasy setting rather than the science fiction settings of the previous games, and follows a generational conflict between the Lions and the Ocarians. The story of Phantasy Star 3 spans 3 generations of characters, where at certain points throughout the game the main character is given the option of marrying a woman from the player's travels, which in turn determines the new main character for the next generation. This gameplay mechanic leads to several different endings, and multiple characters as well as different abilities for these characters, as they may be Ocarian or a mix of Lion and Ocarian. Phantasy Star 3 is critically the least well received game in the series. Phantasy Star 4 The End of the Millennium was released in 1993 for the Mega Drive, and is the 4th and final game in the original Phantasy Star series. Phantasy Star 4 also takes place 1,000 years after Phantasy Star 2, and is seen as a sequel to that game. The game follows the adventures of Chaz Ashley, a bounty hunter who eventually saves the Algol star system. Phantasy Star 4 uses the same RPG conventions as with the previous installments. The game has a number of new features, including a streamlined battle system, comic book style panels that are used as cutscenes, and a reduced learning curve compared to the rest of the series. Phantasy Star 4 concludes the story of the Algol star system, explaining the origin and intention of the series' antagonist, Dark Force. The original 4 games were re-released as a compilation in the Phantasy Star Collection, released in 1998 for the Sega Saturn, originally in Japan only, but was later ported to the Game Boy Advance and the PlayStation 2. Meanwhile, Phantasy Star and Phantasy Star 2 have received enhanced remakes, in the form of Phantasy Star Generation 1 and Phantasy Star Generation 2 respectively. There have also been a number of spin-offs from the original series that were only released in Japan. These include Phantasy Star Gaiden for the Sega Game Gear in 1992, set between the first 2 Phantasy Star games, Phantasy Star Adventures, a first-person text adventure game released for the Game Gear in 1992, and Phantasy Star 2 Text Adventures, released in 1990 for the Sega MegaNet, a modem add-on for the Sega Mega Drive that was again only a Japan release. The franchise returned with Phantasy Star Online, Sega's first foray into MMORPGs, originally released for the Dreamcast in 2000. The game was released as a number of episodes and are primarily hack-and-slash RPGs, with the exception of Episode 3, which uses card-based gameplay. The Phantasy Star Online games offer a real-time battle system, differentiating itself from the previous entries of the series, which had turn-based battle and take place in different star systems. Players choose from 3 different races: humans, Numans and castes, all of whom have distinct advantages and disadvantages in combat. The game concludes with Episode 4, released for Microsoft Windows in 2005. Phantasy Star Universe was released in 2006 for the PC, PlayStation 2 and Xbox 360. The game is a hack-and-slash RPG in the style of Phantasy Star Online, and sees the return of Dark Force back into the universe. The game received an expansion pack, Ambitions of the Illuminous, released in 2007. Phantasy Star Online 2 is set to be released next year in 2013. The Phantasy Star series set the benchmark for modern-day RPGs. With rich storytelling and compelling characters, Phantasy Star draws players in with spectacle and well-balanced gameplay. It is a staple Sega franchise. Well, that ends another episode of Gaming Rewind. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please comment, like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Follow me on Facebook to keep up to date with what I'm doing, and until next time, peace out guys.